Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Rankin.
Here.
Vice Mayor Walter.
Here.
Councilmember Woolridge.
Here.
Councilmember Hawkins.
Here.
Councilmember Galeen is absent this evening. Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Wall.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start off tonight's meeting with a Mormon silence. We'd like to dedicate it to Sergeant Sam Pankey of the Florence Police Department, who retired after 17 and a half years working with us. A man is not known by just a man himself. It's what he commits to the community he lives in. Sam did us a good job, an honorable job. So as we think about him tonight, let's think about all the other officers we have. Let's think about the service that Sam provided to the community and his memory that'll live on after for herever, okay? Thank you. May he rest in peace. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This is the first call to the public for public comment on issues within the jurisdiction of the town council. Council rules limit public comment to 3 minutes. Individual council members may respond to criticism made by those commenting, may ask staff to review a matter raised, or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. However, members of the council shall not discuss or take action on any matter during an open call to the public unless the matters are properly noticed for discussion. Right now, I have one request. Jim Cheetah, front and center, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to see you here tonight.
Thank you.
And Vice Mayor and the rest of the council. I'm here as a follow-up to something I mentioned about a month ago, and that is I called it strategic intent. Most of the time, people talk about strategic intent for a business. I'm talking about the town's strategic intent. And this has elicited some comments with regard to whether or not we need a new strategic plan. And of course, I made some comments on that because a strategic plan can take a long time, can be expensive, and there's nothing wrong with having a strategic intent prior to a strategic plan. In fact, it's done often. We celebrated our 150-year birthday, and we're going to do that all year long, but we did it on Saturday. And if we can refer to our great-great-great-grandmother, Florence, I think 150 is about 7 generations. There's nothing wrong with her needing a hip replacement or a knee or having a little arthritic condition. It's normal at 150 years old. Anyway, I've spent considerable time over the past 5 years, and unfortunately I fell in love with Florence. And I don't mean Florence Anthem. I mean Florence, where we sit, down here on Main Street. I have a data disk with 7 plans that have been done in the last 10 years. 215,000 kilobytes of data. It's very eye-opening. We've talked about Florence being a tourist destination. Maybe the tour bus should come in here every week. Maybe 3, flood the town, help our retail business. We talked about livability. But we certainly are not ready to give up on our historic heritage, which means downtown Florence is really important. I've done a SWOT analysis, not AT, but SWOT. What's our strengths? What's our weaknesses? What's our opportunities? What's our threats? We have a lot of opportunity. We have a very strong budget. We've had it historically. We've had a lot of money compared to other small towns on this part of Pinal County. We have a big budget. We've had it for a long time. We've talked about community asset mapping, small town economic development, historic preservation. I've looked at Old Town Gilbert and their success, and it's really phenomenal. But I think the key thing that's missing, and I think what the citizens want, what people want in order to get energized to help the council, help the staff drive the future of Florence, is a strategic intent. So I have lifted from the businessdictionary.com strategic intent, and I won't read it. I'll give a copy to Lisa. But from that, I have shaped it into a strategic intent for a town, and I'd like to read it. I hope I'm not over my 3 minutes. A strategic intent for a town would be a clear statement of the direction that the management of a town plans on taking the community over some future time frame. The strategic intent of a town needs to be clearly understood by every member of the community so that town staff and residents can be working together toward a consistent overall goal. So I'll give this to Lisa, and in March, I will present to you what I believe should be the strategic intent for the town of Florence, and I would ask you to privately pick it apart, make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Does any other member of the audience have anything they'd like to say? Seeing no movement, I'll close call to the public.
Item 6, public hearings and presentations. Item 6A is a public hearing to receive public comment on the floodplain management regulations for the town of Florence, and it's for first reading of ordinance number 645-16. You will notice that we also list 2 resolutions underneath this item. They will move forward to the next council meeting. Right now, the main focus on this one is ordinance number 645-16, an ordinance of the Town of Florence, Pinal County, Arizona, amending Section 151.01 National Flood Insurance Program under Chapter 151 Floodplain Regulations and within the Land Usage Section of the Town of Florence Code of Ordinances. Items 1 and 2, which are resolutions, are there in case discussions lead that direction and Mr. Eckhoff needs to discuss them. I'll turn it over to Mark Eckhoff for an introduction to the item.
Mark?
Mayor, Council, good evening. 3 items here that I'll probably discuss concurrently, and I'll hopefully try to make it less complicated than it looks like on the agenda, and that also have those 3 items in front of you. Essentially, what we are doing here is we're adopting revised floodplain management regulations and the fees that go with them. There's 3 parts of doing this process. One is a resolution that will make the regulations a public document, so we can file those, people can access those. Do that because the whole document is not inserted into the town code. It's a separate document that's referenced in the code. Second part of the equation is the fees that go along with the regulations, and then the third part is the ordinance that actually references the regulations into the code. So 3 items all related together. And why are we doing that? For quite some time, we have been the floodplain authority for our own community. In the past, we had Pinal County helping us with those duties. At one point, we took those duties over and then referred them back to Pinal County, and then took them back once again. We decided that it would be in our best interest if we performed a floodplain management ourselves, and so we've been doing that for quite some time. But in 2006, we just adopted the entire Pinal County regulations for floodplain management, and which has worked, but it wasn't necessarily ideal because those regulations really were geared a little bit more towards the county structure. So in 2015, when we had our visit from ADWR, which is representing FEMA, and they're coming down to ensure that we have floodplain regulations, that we're doing our job, we're not putting new structures into the floodplain, we're not creating any flood hazards. They came down, we had a great visit with them. I said, you're doing everything great, but you know what? It's really time for you to adopt your own unique regulations and not utilize the county's regulations as your own. So we said, great, we'll work on that. And then they said, you know what? We're working on updating our model regulations, and those are the regulations that are used by most of the communities throughout the state. They said they're doing an update of those, so hang tight and work with us on that update. They got the model regulations done, and then we took it upon ourselves to utilize those, make a couple of modifications to reflect our community, and those have, and we have worked with the town attorney, public works director, previous town manager, and the current town manager on getting to this point where we have those regulations in front of you tonight, again, along with the other two items. So we have the first readings on the two resolutions, and we can do action on those at the next meeting. And then we have a first reading and then a public hearing on the ordinance item. And I would be happy to get into any of the specific details, but it does, in essence, explain our role as the authority in managing floodplain issues and flood hazards here, and ensuring that we're in compliance with FEMA and ADWR, and the regulations are there, and our role is to protect the community from flood hazards. Be happy to address any questions.
Mark, Brent.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, if you will, I'd like to clarify a couple of things that Mark said for the media and for those in the audience. ADWR stands for the Arizona Department of Water Resources. FEMA, I think everybody understands what FEMA is, but that's the Federal Emergency Management Association. The other thing I would point out is the town of Florence belongs to, there's another acronym for you, the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program that's been around since the 70s. We all know why, because of flooding in coastal areas and large rivers, including the Mississippi, and the constant need for repair, or in some cases, areas that weren't known until the mapping took place across the whole nation that they were flood-prone areas, another federal term. In order for Florence to belong to the NFIP, and we all want Florence to belong to it because you have to belong to be able to provide flood insurance to your residents, and my understanding is that somewhere around 200 or over 200 residents of the town of Florence currently have floodplain insurance, so they could not unless we belonged to the NFIP. One of the requirements is that you have to have a floodplain ordinance, and you have to administer to that floodplain ordinance to a minimum standard. So to what Mark said, that minimum standard changes based on federal law. And in this case, it was important for us to update our code to reflect the latest state-provided ordinance, and we have done so in working with ADWR to provide a document that meets those minimum standards, and we will be in compliance with the state now and not have problems with folks when they want to get flood insurance. That's a simple explanation.
Thank you. Does any member of the council have anything they'd like to ask of Mark or Brent?
Do we have maps where the floodplains are in town?
Yes, sir. We are required to have those maps and to administer to those maps. But even more importantly, those maps are available online. They call them DFIRM maps. That stands for Digital Flood Insurance Rate Maps. So anybody, if they would like, they can go online and go to FEMA and look up Florence, and they can actually see the floodplain maps for Florence. The warning I would give you is the DFIRM maps are only updated as budget allows, and that's not town budget, that's federal budget. So what you'll find, especially if you live in the Anthem area, is you'll look at a floodplain map and you'll say, holy Moses, there's no houses here and there's floodplains all over the place. That doesn't mean that they haven't been updated through the letter of map revision or LOMR process. It just takes a while for those maps to get updated at the federal level. So don't be discouraged by that. If there's any questions as to where my structure falls within those maps, you can get with our staff and we can help folks out.
Thank you.
Brent, I guess that I would make a suggestion at our next meeting when we're going to adopt this, to have those maps available to be either posted around the wall or where we can look at them, or on the screen.
Mayor and council, one thing that I could do is that we've incorporated the floodplain maps into our GIS system, and so we could actually present an overall perspective of the town limits and where the floodplain issues are. And that namely would be some of the washes that we've dealt with through the Anthem area, also obviously the Gila River floodplain, and then a couple of other tributaries. Most of our issues are being successfully addressed in the Anthem area with the development that's occurring. And then also upstream and downstream, the Magma Flood Control District has been doing a lot of work to improve the conditions in that area. And of course, in town, you know, the work that we did with the project across the street.
Another question I have for you: how will this affect the projects for north of Florence here, the territorial square?
Mayor, members of the council, what we've done so far as our conditional letter of map revision, or the CLOMAR, and the subsequent letter of map revision that was done for the first roughly 40 acres, that is not impacted by what we're doing here at all. So that project will continue to go on. Same thing in the Anthem area. They've done a conditional letter of map revision and subsequent map changes in phases, and that will not be impacted by what we're doing. It also doesn't impact the work that has been done by the Magma Flood Control District.
Okay, now let's talk about the east side of the old town, DeSoto Street, over east of San Carlos, and with the flood dike that was put in out there. Is that in our flood? Is that considered in the floodplain for Florence? The reason I'm asking is because back in the 50s, before that flood dike was put in, and if it ever came to, hopefully it never happened again, but there was 3 foot of water in the houses over there. And after they put the flood dike in, and that was because of the canals. They had no way to get them out. And the water was coming down that side of town, and there was a lot of homes over there that had 3 foot of water in them. Do you know if that's on the floodplain map or anything, or how is that addressed?
By what we're doing, we're not changing any properties, whether they're in the floodplain or not in the floodplain. So what we are doing is providing the regulatory framework for when properties are deemed to be in a flood hazard area, how those situations can be mitigated or prevent them from happening in the future at all. So what we're doing at all does not change the map. So what FEMA designates in a floodplain or not in a floodplain is unchanged by what we are doing. And in areas that you describe, even though if you may look on a map and it may not look like it's in a floodplain, if we know that there's a flood hazard, that's another situation to look at, and it may require specific study or evaluation. There are some areas like that that can have drainage issues or flooding issues that maybe perhaps have not been fully determined or analyzed yet.
Now, is the majority of the London property that's to the east of us, north and east to us, is that in the floodplain?
Mayor, members of the council, the majority of the property behind Town Hall or north of Town Hall, which is owned by the by Yole LLC, which is also known as the London family. Majority of that property is indeed in the floodplain. A good percentage of it, I forget the exact percentage, but it can be removed upon adding fill to the property. That may be roughly about a 60-40 split. They may end up having about 40% of the property or more that will not have any development whatsoever.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Karen?
I have a question. In the last few years, the Magma Flood Control District has imposed significant taxation on residents in Anthem. When you refer to fees as part of this amended plan, how does that interface with the taxation?
That's a very good question, Councilmember Wall, Mayor, members of the council. The Magma Flood Control District is a separate flood control taxing district, so that is outside of what the town of Florence can have control over. So our fees are for regulating the floodplain within the town of Florence, and for work that we do or private parties apply to do. They are separate. They are completely separate from the taxing authority of the Magma Flood Control District. So they can tax properties within their district to do improvements somewhere in their district. And they have, as you know, a quite expansive district, and they've actually have been doing a lot of work, hence the work that we've seen on the Magma flood control structure, for one.
Who pays the fees associated with this plan?
Private parties would pay the fees for this. Now, the way that the regulations work, though, is, I mean, our primary goal, Mayor, council members, is to, where we can, just prevent development occurring from the floodplain at all, and not changing the floodplain where it's not necessary to change it. When there is a reasonable plan to modify it, then the applicant would propose, such as the case with Pulte Homes in the Anthem area, they would propose the engineering plans to change those washes within the community, to widen them out and mitigate the situation there. And they would present engineering plans to us, and then we in turn would work with them to get those plans approved by FEMA. And ultimately, through that process, they get their maps updated. And I apologize, there is a plethora of acronyms, so ADWR, FEMA, NFIP, et cetera, I apologize for those, but it's...
Karen, I think that what you're looking at, if I understood it right, is be the property owner's responsibility to do it, not the taxpayers like in a district.
That's what I was wondering.
Brent?
I'm going to make a comparison that is not exactly lineal, but bear with me. Think of the floodplain administration and the ordinance that's before you and will be before you in the future like the building code. It's the standard by which we're required by the state and federal government to administer the floodplain. Much like the building code is the standard by which developers have to build their product for health, safety, and welfare, and the city's role in that to make sure that the developer meets the intent of that code for health, safety, and welfare. So the document you're reviewing, much like the building code, doesn't tell people where they can build a house, or if they can build a house, or what the house has to be built out of. But if they decide they're going to build a house and they're going to build it out of wood stick construction, the type of boards that have to be used, the spacing of those boards, and associated with it. So if you come in to build a house, we have a protocol set in place. We know what it costs you to get a permit to build the house and the things that'll be required, the inspections that'll be required along the way. So in this case, if you were a developer and you owned some land and it was in a floodplain, it sets out the process for what you have to submit, when you have to submit it, who you have to submit it to, what the cost will be of the engineering review that occurs in-house, and what the cost of that permit is from an administrative perspective. The town doesn't serve in the role to approve the actual permit. That can only be done by FEMA. So we're kind of a pass-through agency. But in this code, it requires us to do a certain level of engineering review and compliance review with our code. And whoever is tasked with being the floodplain administrator, whether that's Mark or I or Wayne, at this time, we haven't decided that yet. We haven't drawn straws. But we do have to take responsibility for receiving that submittal, doing preliminary review, and ultimately we sign off on it before it goes to FEMA to let them know that it's in compliance with our local regulations. Does that make sense? So we're not determining what any district, levies, none of that's included. This is like getting a building permit. So if you want to bang, and there's several different ways that could be impacted. We've talked about a CLOMR, which is a conditional letter of map revision. There's a LOMR, which is a letter of map revision. For those of you in the audience, those are typically multiple year projects that require hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering. The town just did that on the Territory Square project out here. But there are other things like standard map revisions. There are elevation certificates. So a building that historically has been at a location and hasn't flooded in the 83, 93 flood, that folks believe it's built above the floodplain, it gives a private person the right to come in and from an engineering and survey perspective, show that the actual structure is protected so they don't have to get flood insurance. Other things that have to be permitted is, say there was a rock and gravel mine that was going to occur. We need to be able to review that, and so does FEMA, to make sure that it doesn't materially change the water course and change the floodplains and flood people out. So those are the kind of things that are in the fee schedule for how we perform our administrative process. It's actually required by federal law. 44 CFR is the law that covers floodplain administration.
I guess you brought up another point I'd like to ask a question about. What about sand and gravel pits that are right outside the town limits that are not in the town limits?
They would have to work through Pinal County. Pinal County would be their floodplain administrator, not the town of Florence.
So how do we have a working agreement or arrangement with Pinal County to make sure that our plans are working together?
I have worked with Pinal County for many years in the floodplain arena and floodplain administration, and I will tell you, I have always had a wonderful relationship with Elise Moore, who's the county floodplain administrator, and their staff. My experience, I have no experience in Florence with this, but certainly in my past, I have a lot of experience with them coming to us first if there's something going on in the floodplain. And they have regional meetings quarterly where they invite all of the entities to come in and talk about regional issues. Okay. As a matter of fact, they do regional projects. You probably noticed on your tax bill as well, Councilwoman, that there's a Pinal County flood district tax. That's for not big infrastructure projects necessarily, but they have done an update in aerial photography and things like that in the past with that county floodplain money.
Mark, let me ask you this. Brent wasn't here when this gravel pit went in up here, upriver from it. How much communication did the town have with the county on that?
Mayor, members of the council, I don't know if I recall when that particular one went in either. And up until about the time we started doing the floodplain work on this project, actually, most of the floodplain work had been handled strictly through engineering. But I do know that as I started working on the CLOMR and LOMR process for Territory Square and the property that we have, there was significant coordination with Pinal County. And through our process and through our submittals to FEMA, we had to show that the work that we did was not having a detrimental effect on properties upstream or downstream, or even north or south. So I'm sure that's the standard overall that they would have to follow with that as well. But I can tell you that the lines of communication have definitely improved in that area. And he mentions Elise Moore, Scott Bender, and so forth, the engineering staff over there. There's been a lot of coordination in recent times.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that, because I don't know what's going to happen when we have another flood come down the river with that big pile of sand there, where it's going to direct that water to. Anybody else? Okay, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is any member of the public have anything they'd like to say? Ruth?
Ruth Harrison, Florence, Arizona. I was reading some of the material there, and it says a few things. For instance, it says that these things that you're going to be adopting, supposedly, are to control the alteration of natural floodplains, stream channels, and natural protective barriers which help to accommodate or channel floodwaters, to control filling, grading, dredging, and other development that may increase flood damage, to prevent or regulate the construction of flood barriers that will unnaturally divert floodwaters or which may increase flood hazards in other areas. And when you talk about Territory Square, and the floods of 83 and 93 were mentioned as well, I don't know if any of you have seen pictures of those floods, but I have, with water from one side of the floodplain to the other coming down the river. And my fear would be that in spite of all of this Clomar, Lomar business that's been talked about, that eventually a huge flood will come down and hit that 4-foot rise where we have the community center and the pool area and the library, and come down Main Street and take out who knows what downtown, and nobody wants that. So I hope you all are aware of that and thinking about that as I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public have anything they'd like to say in the public hearing? I'd like to say one thing before we close the public hearing, that when we adopt this, or if we adopt it, that we automatically tell staff or direct staff to start working with Corps of Engineers on getting that river channeled all the way from here to Attaway Road at least. I think that's where a lot of the problem is. It backs it up. There's so much growth in that river that it needs to be done. And to me, if we mitigate that'll help mitigate the flooding in this part of town. This time I'll close the public hearing.
Item B, retirement award to Florence K.A. Marco for 5 years and 8 months of dedicated service. We're asking the council to allow us to move this item to the next meeting. Marco's partner, Officer Ballard, is not able to be present this evening, and we feel it's very important that they do receive this award together. Item C, presentation of the 2015 annual report from the Greater Florence Chamber of Commerce.
Mayor Rankin, members of the council.
Here you are.
We have Beth Beatty in the audience this evening. She's going to come up and present the 2015 Chamber of Commerce annual report. And Ms. Beatty was recently installed as the board president of the Chamber of Commerce, and she's had a very busy last month and a half, to include some pretty major staff changes. And I also would like to acknowledge Ms. Jessica Moore, who is now serving as interim executive director of the Chamber. Ms. Beatty.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We provided a very comprehensive written report to you, so I will just kind of hit some highlights. We have presented Business of the Month award meetings every month last year, and also chamber luncheons with speakers. We've had 96 ribbon cuttings this year for new businesses that have joined. As far as marketing, we are using social media and a weekly email newsletter to market not only the chamber events, but also all of the town events. We did have 2 special events, Casino Night, and we had our first annual Chamber Challenge Golf Tournament last year, which we will do again this year. The Visitor Center and McFarland Park, we had 8,915 visitors during 2015. We've added an Arizona workforce access point at the Visitor Center, and the gift shop is now offering ACI items from prison-made items, which has greatly increased the sales there. We actually had over 1,200 in sales just last week. The financial reports, detailed financial reports, are also attached for your review. I won't go through them. And an analysis of the special events is attached for your review. Currently, the Chamber has 239 paid members. 118 of those are new members for 2015. Going forward, we're going to continue to emphasize the membership growth, but also increase the emphasis on membership satisfaction and retention. And that's...
You remember the council have any questions of Beth?
I have one question.
Yes.
Do you happen to know the percentage of members that are within the town limits versus the members who are outside town limits?
I do not have that information. I could get it for you.
I would just be interested to know.
Karen, are you talking about members or businesses within?
Business
Members.
I'd like to know how many business owners from Florence are in the chamber
Okay.
than just from outside the town limits. The other thing is notification of the council on ribbon cuttings is very important. I didn't know anything about the Taco Bell. I don't know if any of you all did. When we have something like that going on, since we're putting a lot of money into the chamber, I think it'd be very advantageous to notify the council so if we want to be there for it or be involved in it, that we're there. It's good advertisement for the chamber, it's good advertisement for the council members and for the town of Florence and for the business to know that we do have an interest in it. So that is just my only comment. I'm looking forward to casino night again. If we have that same guy that's rolling the dice, or that's doing where I can roll the dice.
We probably will. We
Okay.
are also going to be having a second chance prom coming up in April or May.
Music from the wind.
Music from when we were all young and going to prom. It'll have to be a variety.
White sport coat and pink carnation. We give you quite a bit of money,
I realize.
and we appreciate the job you're doing, but the communications do need to be a little bit better this year. I would hope that it would,
That is a major focus too. I think we already have improved it somewhat.
and again, become involved with our 150th birthday as we'll be coming forward with more items on that. Okay?
Yep.
Beth, thank you very much.
Item D, presentation by the Greater Florence Chamber of Commerce recognizing Valentino's Eatery as Business of the Month.
Okay.
Mayor and council, thank you. The Florence Chamber would like to present this plaque to Valentino's. They couldn't be here tonight, but it is for the month of February, and it will be displayed at the Safeway Plaza at their restaurant.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be handled by a single vote as part of the consent agenda unless a council member or member of the public objects at the time the item is called. Item A, approval of a vehicular field training agreement between the Town of Florence Fire Department and the Arizona Academy of Emergency Services for education and training for students to become certified emergency medical technicians, paramedics by the Arizona Department of Health Services. Item B, approval of Pinal County Mounted Posse's application for a special event liquor license application to the Arizona Department of Liquor License and Control for a Road to Country Thunder event to be held on April 2nd, 2016. Item C, approval of the January 4th and January 19th, 2016 minutes. The January 19th, 2016 minutes will be corrected to be the modified format that's approved by council. Item D, receive and file the October 28, 2015 Historic District Advisory Commission minutes. Mayor, members of council, that is your consent agenda this evening.
Does any member of the council have anything elect taken off the consent agenda? Does any member of the public like anything taken off the consent agenda? Seeing no movement, I need a motion.
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
New business, item A, discussion, approval, disapproval of entering into a professional service contract with EUSI LLC and assigning task order number 1 for Public Works Management Support and Consulting. Mr. Billingsley will address this item.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as you're all aware, our Public Works Director, Wayne Costa, is retiring from the town as of this month. As part of that, clearly we have and we'll continue to advertise for that position. We'll have a closing in a few weeks with respect to that job. But as you know, it takes a while to fill those positions. I personally believe that the Public Works Department is in a position right now where we don't want to lose a step. We want to continue to move forward. We want to improve where necessary. So therefore, number one, Jess Knutson has been assigned to serve in an interim capacity as an administrative manager over the Public Works Department upon Wayne's departure. And secondarily, I have before you tonight for decision potential to approve a professional services contract with a company named EUSI. Here tonight representing EUSI is Paul. And if you would like to ask him questions or have him address the council, I'm sure he would be willing to do that. His name is Paul Hendricks. A little bit about Paul. He would serve as technical advisor to assist Jess in assessing the department, its organizational structure, the way that we handle projects and the way that we move forward in a capacity to assist so that when a new director comes on board, we are heading in a proper direction, in addition to being a technical advisor to Jess on technical issues having to do with the department, because he is not a operator in water sewer, he's not a professional engineer, he's not a specialist in any of those fields. Paul, a little bit about him. He used to run all of the sewer plants in Detroit, Michigan. He was hired away from Michigan and ran the sewage treatment plants for the city of Phoenix for a number of years. He and his wife have had a couple of different consulting firms. The current firm that Paul works for, EUSI, is actually owned by his son. He's a past public works director, is very astute in the various administrative functions having to do with public works, as well as the oversight provided to the town of Florence by the state and federal government. And I believe that he is going to he and his team are going to be able to provide an invaluable service for us going forward to try and make sure that we continue our momentum and go in a proper direction with respect to the Public Works Department. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Brent? Karen?
The proposed contract indicates Exhibit A. I didn't see that attached.
Here's Exhibit A. I believe our attorney has multiple copies of Exhibit A.
Thank you.
Essentially, Exhibit A is a generalized scope of services that talks to a certain number of general functions that they will serve for us, as well as some focused activities that that they will perform during their time here.
I also, to go over Exhibit A, because this wasn't here until this evening, I understand your specialty areas in wastewater and sewer, which is great because obviously there's a need within our infrastructure. However, will you also be looking into like our trash, our streets, our roads, and giving an assessment and comprehensive overview, because those are also some areas that are of concern within our town?
Yes, ma'am. Paul can certainly answer for himself, but he and I worked on the scope. Absolutely. I think that there's two key things to get out of Exhibit A, and that is the first couple months as part of this contract are going to be more or less an analysis of the department as a whole. Its organizational structure, its deficiencies, its opportunities for success, not only operationally, but organizationally. And so you'll notice that the contract is front-loaded based on that assessment and that analysis, and he's already began that work. He was here last Wednesday, last Friday, and all day today. Most of that time was spent with the Public Works Department and with Jess. I would also point out that he has a lot of expertise on the wastewater side, but he has the equal qualification and expertise on the water side, as well as in general public works, including solid waste, transportation, et cetera. So he's going to be giving us a roadmap forward for the department to make sure that we're organized properly and staffed properly. That's part of his task.
Okay. And just as a point, I'd like him to, continue to work with you on some of the trash that's been throughout the city. We've talked about it before. Just making sure everything is clean. the appearances, as well as some of the areas of concern that we had shared before with the roadways in regards to some of the cracks and the holes that have been happening.
Now keep in mind, he's going to be helping us at the 20,000 foot level on how we run. Those specific day-to-day things about streets and street maintenance and cracks, that's going to be Jess's responsibility. Jess is going to be the day-to-day manager for Public Works. Paul's just going to come in and advise us on how we get better and
Efficient.
well, we currently have a consent order and multiple notices of violation. We need to get those under control because those are state violations that we have. As a matter of fact, Paul was working with me today on 30-day correspondence and notice to the state regarding the backup that we had at the sewage treatment plant a couple weeks ago. So, yes.
Thank you.
Any other, where are we getting the money to pay them?
Well, it'll be a variety of places. We have 2 enterprise funds in water and sewer that have an existing fund balance. We also have HERF on the transportation side, if he's working on transportation things, that has a fund balance as well, and we will not be dipping into general fund to fund his costs.
This will keep us in good standing with the budget you're going to be presenting later?
Yes, it's important, I guess, that I answer the question I started to answer earlier. So there was 2 parts. One is this technical assistance and analysis, an audit of the department, if you will. The second part is ongoing support if we need it. And that has been very carefully targeted to the amount that we pay monthly to the existing director. So if we need Paul to continue on, we're continuing to search for a director, we need additional support. This contract has been set up in such a way that he will cost us the same amount that we would have been paying the Public Works Director for the same time period.
And have you gone out for advertisement for a Public Works Director?
Yes, sir.
And when are the dates close on that?
Scott?
Mayor, member of the council, we set up the recruitment to have the first review day so that we can take a look at the applications that come in before that. I think we're 2 weeks out on that. And then we'll be conducting a review at that particular point in time, but we'll continue to receive applications from interested parties. So it allows us the opportunity to have the recruitment ongoing and yet establish a point in time so we can evaluate the applications that have come in.
And the other thing, Paul will be helping us with a review of the applications for the position?
We have that. We have the ability for him to do that if it makes fiscal sense. I will tell you, and I know that I talked to you about this earlier today, Mayor, I had a grand plan of a few things that I was going to have Paul help us out with, but due to some of the research that we've done and some of the things that we've uncovered just in the last couple days, it's caused me to refine what Paul is going to do to things that are imminent that we need to address, and then these other things we'll just address as budget allows and as time allows. The clerk wanted me to point out that Exhibit A is actually in your book. That what you had on your counter was there was an amendment made to the contract. So the original contract as of last week when it went out to council and Exhibit A are in there, but there was a change to the contract. And I guess that begs the question, what was the change to the contract before the first and the second version?
The attorney.
Mayor, members of the council. Well, we had some ongoing discussions about the scope or the duration of the task order and the type of insurance that Paul would provide. And we resolved those, and essentially we'll address the overall contract is for 1 year, but it doesn't mean that the services will be used that long. So the task order that I handed out, and that was also in your packet, I think, had a different duration than what you see in the contract. It's a much shorter duration, 6 months. So we addressed that, and as far as insurance, schedule, pricing, that will be handled by each task order if there are other task orders other than this one.
Okay, thank you.
And I did have one more just question, and this is something that you might need to go back and look at, but years ago when we had privatized the garbage, we set aside a line item, and I don't recall the exact dollar amount that was set. I just want to verify, is that still there? Is that something that we need to bring back to the council for a discussion?
Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, I can tell you with confidence, since we just presented this to the Budget Committee a few weeks ago, there is an existing line item in the sanitation budget. I don't remember, Gabe, how much is in it, but there is an existing standing item in that budget because we talked about it with the Budget Committee.
Okay, because I recall, that was for, in case we went back into public, or if we were using that for a transfer service.
The monies that are available within the budget, they were the monies that were collected from the town of Florence. And what we did was we did some attachments to the RAD agreement, just can go into further detail with this, but to allow for us to allow citizens to go out to the transfer station and to dump things and various things. That's how we're using the money. But there is still line item within the budget.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
We need a motion.
Make a motion, we enter into the professional services contract with EUSI LLC for public works management support and consulting services.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second, and before I go on, does any other member of the council have any other questions? I didn't ask that. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve entering into a professional service contract with EUSI LLC for public works management support and consulting services. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item B, discussion approval, disapproval of the 2015-16 target budget.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, it does me great pleasure to bring this presentation before you this evening. I'm not sure how to change it.
Now he's going to want somebody hired to switch it for him.
I doubt it, but I did find the remote. The clerk wanted me to point out, as well as the Budget Committee, before I get into this presentation, this is not a presentation on the 16-17 Town of Florence budget or CIP. This is a presentation on our existing 15-16 budget. There is a budget calendar. It's available online. I believe it's been shared with council. That is a series of public hearings and discussions with respect to adoption of this next year's budget. So what I'm talking about tonight has to do with the existing adopted budget. When I arrived, actually before I even applied in the town of Florence, I became aware that the town was running a deficit in terms of its existing budget. I wasn't exactly sure what that was, but that has been quantified for me once I arrived here. We're running a deficit in terms of our expenditures when compared with our revenues of about $1.2 million. So we are currently budgeted, we have a balanced budget. That balanced budget essentially pulls out a savings, $1.2 million, to balance it. So we're spending $1.2 million than we're projected to bring in. That's a challenging thing. It's a challenging thing for a government, but one of the things that I was faced with trying to get under control, the staff has done a remarkable job. The Budget Committee has provided sage advice and assisted us greatly with understanding in terms of how to go forward. First thing that I did when I got to Florence was, and of course it's not working.
Yep. Here comes the guy we hired.
Here we go. Now it'll work. One of the things that coming right through the door I needed to try and understand is, could we get to a point where we made adjustments to the budget to make up for that $1.2 million in reserves? We worked very hard on that as a team, and it became very evident that it was going to be impossible to reduce our budget by $1.2 million without very much changing the way we do business, how many employees we have, the programs that we provide, et cetera. So the philosophy that I adopted and I'm bringing forward tonight, hopefully with council support, is setting a target to make key reductions to our existing budget so that we can not only carry those changes into next year and help us with our financial status, but that we might make a large enough dent that over the next few years we could completely eliminate the need for deficit spending. What does that mean? Currently, we have less than $5 million in general fund savings account. That's the best way to put it, rainy day funds. Obviously, if we continue forward deficit spending on course, on par where we're at now, or adding inflation to that, we're going to have some severe financial problems 2 years from now. So what we've attempted to do and what this presentation is about is making strategic reductions to increase that health. So instead of a 2 to 3 year time frame where we're going to have financial issues, extending that to 4 to 5 years. The target that we've set, and this is not a budget amendment, this is a target, this is very carefully chosen language, is $500,000. As a staff and with the budget committee, we're hoping to reduce the existing program deficit of 1.2 by $500,000. This is probably the most important slide in the presentation, and although I'm colorblind, I believe I understand what it says now. On the X and a Y axis, on the X axis, you have the last 6 years' budgets with the town of Florence, and on the Y axis, you have a number in millions of dollars. So the top number is 16 million, the bottom number is 8 million. The blue line are our revenues. These are our actual revenues, including projected revenues for this year. The yellow are budgeted expenditures, and the red is actual expenditures. So what you'll see is our expenditures have considered to go up, or have gone up considerably rather over the last few years. And then you see a normalization. Not only have the expenditures gone up, but what you're seeing is we're expending everything that we're budgeting. So it's kind of a double whammy. But you can see there is a difference between the red line and the blue line in that furthest year. That difference between the red line and the blue line is $1.2 million. What are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about thoughts on how to reduce our expenditures, thoughts on how to generate additional revenue, and 3 ways that we may be able to change the way that we do business to become more efficient and more effective, ultimately arriving at a mid-year target. Now, that said, some of the things I'm going to talk about in terms of reducing expenditures and increasing revenues, I'm not saying that we've done these. I'm saying that they're ideas. We've been able to do some of those or come up with a plan on how to implement some of those. But there are other things that we can clearly do, and we're working through that on a whole list of issues with the budget committee for next year's budget. So how do we reduce expenditures? One of the ways that we've come up with is to defer capital projects. The town of Florence on an annualized basis approves a capital improvement program. One of the things that I found about Florence is we put a lot of things in the capital improvement program, but we don't remove a lot of things from the capital improvement program from year to year. So the exercise that we went through as a staff was we took everything in the first 5 years of the CIP and moved it out by a year. We then pulled back anything that we're required to do for legal reasons, anything that is a contractual requirement with an entity, anything that we're required to do because we collected development impact fees for that, and it's included in our development impact fee study, and we have a timeline issue. And then any projects that have been deemed special priority projects that the town needs to complete. A lot of those would be for health, safety, and welfare perspective. They've been pulled back in. So I don't remember the exact number in this year's CIP, but it went from like $16 million to now it's like 5.6. So a considerable reduction. We kept those projects in there that were critical to complete, that we could complete in this fiscal year, as well as the potential projects for next year. And that helps us a little bit from the budget perspective. Eliminate non-essential services. A number of things have been identified as non-essential. Freeze non-essential positions. You're going to hear a little bit more later. But we have frozen 8 positions now with the potential for a 9th as they've become vacated. And Also, and we've had some communications about this recently as well, about doing our best to reduce professional services. Now that said, it's a little bit funny because we just hired a guy to do a professional service, but the thought is to try and reduce some of that use of professional services. The two sub-bullets there, and I'll speak to this briefly, but it's your next item on your agenda, is there was money in this year's budget to update the utility rate study for water and sewer. We're suggesting tonight in the item that follows this that we defer that to next year. We have deferred having increases. Council had adopted a schedule on increases. We have deferred on those increases, and upon further review of that study, we find that some of the projects have been completed, others have not been completed, that were directly tied to those increases. So it's probably best if we update that study and hold off on updating it until we're fully ready to go forward and can afford that update and the rate increases that may come from that. We also have a number of contracts that help us with building inspection, plan review, enforcement, fire marshal services. We are currently working to use IGAs, intergovernmental agreements, with entities that are other governments like Pinal County to assist us with those services instead of paying a consultant.
Okay, let me ask you before, go back to that.
I'm trying.
If any council member has questions while Brent's going through this, please let him know so we can get them answered. What are the non-essential services you're planning to eliminate or are going to ask us to eliminate?
We're not proposing any right now. I guess the best way I would explain that is we presented a 3-page list to the budget committee on how to enhance revenues, how to reduce expenditures, and how to change the way that we do business. They went through that list as a budget committee and said, no, yes, no, yes, and they gave us some homework in terms of providing white papers or technical papers on those items that they wanted further information. We have gone back once and shared some of that information. More information has been requested and additional research and papers are being written at this time. We'll be taking them back to the budget committee. I'm not proposing we eliminate anything as of today, but I believe that will be coming forward.
Okay, another question I have for you. When we defer the utility rate study, all that's doing is putting it off, and which is going to, when we do the rate study, is going to show a higher rate that needs to be increased than what it is today. Is that correct?
That may not be necessarily true. Your clerk is going to give a presentation following this one that's going to shine some light on that. Okay. So I would defer to her. I don't want to steal her thunder.
Okay.
Can I go forward?
Yes.
How do we generate revenue? One of the things that came forward out of the budget committee was, is there a potential to do a vacant property assessment from a code perspective to encourage people to not have vacant properties? That's one of those things that we're currently working on a white paper for. Auction and sell surplus property. We're putting together at least one auction as we speak, and we have a number of things to get rid of there. Review fee schedule, that's another one that's being researched and provided to the budget committee. Evaluate services. One of the things that came up was, couldn't we hire a grants writer and that person would offset their salary and more? As you know, Jennifer is currently serving in the capacity as a grants administrator, not necessarily a grants writer. That's something that we're looking into as well, but it was recommended to us. Here's the one that I think is very important. In terms of the water and sewer rates, not only are we recommending to defer the study to next fiscal year, we're recommending that council not increase rates on water and sewer to our customers at this time. We believe that the old study's outdated. We believe that those projects need to be looked at closer. We believe that the assumptions that were used in the past study need to be looked at closer. So the main bullet that we wanted to hit on and the budget committee want us to hit on is we need to review our fees. We need to review our rates. We need to review what our taxes look like and what we're collecting and what that means. But just because we're reviewing it doesn't mean that that equals an automatic increase. And case in point, staff is not recommending we increase the water and sewer rates this year. Change the way we do business. One of the things that we're looking at very heavily right now, I've reviewed 2 white papers, actually today, is looking at our minimum staffing levels in departments. I talked a little bit about an IGA with other governments to assist. Wanted to make sure that the public knew that this is not a new thing for Florence. We have an IGA with Eloy right now with the magistrate that has saved the town about $28,000. So it's something that we've done successfully before. One of the things that we've talked about consistently is the need to add to our volunteer workforce. And last weekend there was 140 volunteers that helped out with the home tour. If we can continue to tap into that, if we continue to have some of the success that our police department has on a daily basis, that will really help us. Taking a serious look, and we're going to continue to take a serious look at regional dispatch, and if any efficiencies could be reached at that point. There's 2 different ways to look at that topic. Either we serve as a regional dispatch for outside entities, which we're doing right now for Superior, or we join with others to dispatch in a more efficient and effective way. We've looked at reducing our hour of operation at city facilities, and whether that makes sense. Things like the library, the swimming pool, et cetera, and papers are being generated on that as well. One of the things that you will see us come forward, and it's already been presented to the Budget Committee twice, is the town has adopted some budget policies in the past concerning one-time revenues. We as a staff want to come back to council at a future point and encourage the council to make some adjustments to that policy to try and assist us in getting out of the $1.2 million deficit. We believe that it's important to take care of that deficit now and that deficit spending, and that we can make up for those lost revenues on a CIP side as we go forward. So we plan to come forward to council to discuss that further. We've talked about deferring capital projects. I talked about that earlier. We talked about professional service contracts. I just lost that, sorry. We talked about the 8 frozen positions. I wanted to point out to the council and to the public that contrary to rumors that I've heard, those frozen positions haven't come from 1 department or 2 departments. As you can tell up there, it's come from a variety of departments, and like I said, I think there's going to be 1 more added to that list in the near future once the person retires. We also have gone through and done a considerable amount of review of our benefits, our benefit expenditures, as well as our revenue projections over the year. As you know, we have to project how much we believe we're going to expend. We also have to forecast how much you think that we're going to earn. We've gone through all of those projections, and we've actually made some positive headway in terms of we were very conservative in some of our projections last year, and we've been able to exceed our projections, and so we've gone through and updated those projections as of 6 months through the year to make sure that we're using those resources efficiently. The last thing on this slide is probably the most painful thing that occurred for the folks sitting at the table around the room. I sat down for a series of days and I went through every single budget for every single department. And I did what are called line item adjustments. I went line item by line item, looked at what was budgeted, looked what had been spent 6 months through the year, and looked at what had been expended in those line items for a 3-year trend prior to that. Gabe was instrumental in being able to provide me that information, as well as Councilwoman Guillen, in terms of giving me a heads up on how things happened and changes that occurred. Through doing that, I went through each and every budget, line item by line item, and brought every individual department director and manager into my office, and we went through and we negotiated on cuts, line item by line item, every department. If any of you have been in my office recently, you'll see a list of all the departments in code on my wall with a number beside it. Those are the line item adjustments that happen department by department. The last time I checked, it was about $233,000. We took out of individual departments, line item by line item. Well, there we go. It's a new number, 264. This gives you a general idea of what that means. You'll notice that HERF or Public Works, water, sewer, they're not up there. That's because we're talking about general fund liability right now. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Public Works has a designated fund that can only be spent on roads. It's called HERF. We also have a half-cent excise tax that meets that category. And then we have enterprise funds for our water, sewer utilities, as well as our solid waste utilities. Those can't be used by any other employees or any other department, and it can't go into our general fund. I assure you that in each of those funds, they had reductions similar to these, but we can't reflect it here because this is a general fund reduction. So in terms of the line item adjustments, 164,700. I'm here tonight to report to you that although I'm not going to give you a number, I will tell you that I am confident, the Budget Committee is confident, that we have met our target. And I'm confident that our expenditures, our programmed expenditures in this fiscal year have in fact been reduced by $500,000. I don't want to tie a number to it because a number of things could change. We could have emergencies that cause us to expend additional funds. We could have bills that are behind and haven't been submitted to us from individual departments, from contractors, et cetera, that we don't know of as of this date. But I am confident telling the public and the council that in terms of a mid-year budget target, we're going to reduce our expenditures and meet that target by at least $500,000. The closer that we get to 1.2 million, the better for us going into the next fiscal year. Are there any questions?
Any council member have any questions?
Yeah, I guess I don't understand. You say the line item adjustments is 264,000, but your target's 500,000.
Yes.
Looks like you're only halfway there.
No, that's just the line item adjustments. That doesn't include the positions that have been frozen. That doesn't include the changes in the CIP, deferring projects to future years. That doesn't include our reprojections of our revenues and our expenditures. There are a number of things that went into that number beyond the line item adjustments.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words, what we're looking at there, these would be operational items instead of personnel and stuff like that.
We tried to touch on everything across every department, but yes, to try and reduce that $1.2 million general fund deficit. I mean, council understands this, and so does the public, because this is presented to the public every year. You understand that operations is the lion's share of the town's budget. The people, the benefits, the programs, they're the lion's share of the budget. So I guess it's important to point out, our priorities as we went forward was to not injure or to reduce our employees in an arbitrary way. Didn't want to affect them. We didn't want to affect the benefits and the things that help us draw people and keep people in our organization. And lastly, we didn't want to materially affect the programs that we're able to provide the folks of Florence that they need on a daily basis. So we're trying to do this in a way that is responsible in the current fiscal year as a team. I think it's important to say as a team, and I'm very happy with what we've come up with, and I'm happy to present it to you tonight.
Okay, going back, the 8 frozen positions are not in this line item adjustment, is that correct?
They are, and they're not in the line item adjustment, they're in the overall target, yes.
So in other words, we're looking at that 264, and then if you would assume that those 8 positions are going to be another 200,000, you're almost there.
I don't want to assume, but yes, we are going to meet the 500,000, yes.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm confident in that. Gabe, am I confident in that? Okay. Gabe's nodding, I feel better.
I appreciate everybody's hard work and being team players and sacrificing non-essential things. So that's a good start, a good beginning, because we really need to get back on our fiscal responsibility and not spend more than we take in. So I'm happy to say that I am proud of our staff and everybody being a team player, and hopefully we'll get back on the right road. Thank you.
I'd also like to thank you for doing such a good job, staff. This had to be difficult, but needs to be done. We need to live within our means, and I think you're going in the right direction. Thank you.
Sure.
Again, I know this is a challenging for the team and everything. I'd communicated before. I just wanted to make sure the rest of the council is aware. Once we get closer to that point, I would like us all to be able to sit down, as a council, public invited to listen, just to get the insight of the budgetary committee of what you've talked about, and that will give us an opportunity to also share any additional insights or areas that need to be looked at.
I don't have a copy of the calendar in front of me right now, but I know that we have a bunch of impending deadlines, Gabe.
I know Lisa created a very detailed calendar for us, but I just want to make sure that we stay on that. We're able to communicate what is happening, especially with our elections coming up. We want to make sure we have transparency.
Yes, ma'am, and I wanted to thank Lisa, certainly Gabe. Hundreds of hours have been spent getting to this point just on this year's budget target, let alone the other work that's going on. I wanted to thank all of the department managers and directors. Nobody's got mad and thrown anything at me or called me names and stomped out of my office yet. Yeah. And lastly, I wanted to thank the budget.
And when you were present.
When I was present, yeah. So I also want to make sure I thank the budget committee because a number of these things we've run up against some philosophical concerns and what's too far and what's not enough, and they've helped us understand what's too far and what's not enough. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bruce.
Item C, discussion, approval, disapproval on rate increases programmed in the water and wastewater and long-term financial plan adopted on February 2012, effective July 1, 2016. Mayor and members of the council, I don't know how much we need to talk about. The manager stole all my thunder. I do want to go over in how rates are created and the reason why we're here tonight. The reason why we're bringing this item before you tonight, and I am speaking to you on behalf of the Budget Committee, is because we are at the time to where the council needs to make a decision whether we are going to increase rates or not. They're new. They're new because they're requirements that have been having to be done in the last 5 years, but they're not new to government. Whenever we increase rates, we do have to give the public notice. We have to log those notice. We have to apply. We have to ask the council to adopt a notice of intent to increase rates. The exhibit that is included in this item as Exhibit A is your calendar of events for increasing rates, if that's what council would want to do. If you see that very first date on that calendar is March 7th. So if the town of Florence was to increase rates, it would have to be a notice of intent that is going before council on March 7th. So we thought we would go ahead as a budget committee and bring this item before council. Let's go over how rates are adopted. Rates are actually adopted. We hire a consultant to come in, and the consultant actually looks at the work that we're doing. They look at the operational expense, they look at the capital outlay, they look at the debt that we have. And what they do is they make a perfect rate for operating that utility. So when the Budget Committee reviewed this item, we went back in and we reviewed the old budget, or the old rate study that was adopted. And what we noted is that the rate study for the 2012 adoption did go back, and it stated that the town of Florence hadn't proceeded with completing a lot of the projects. So what we really wanted to do is we wanted to go in and we wanted to look at the system to make sure that we are doing the capital improvements, that the things that are in the rate study are being completed, to make sure that those rates are the proper rates. So we felt this year, instead of moving forward, we would like to go ahead and look at our two systems, look at the work that needs to be done, make sure that we're moving forward in the direction of the 2010, the 2012 rate study put in place for us. Once we have that and we know where we are with our public works audit that's happening, then we'll be able to go back in and make a schedule to council saying whether or not we should go forward with a rate study and be able to work with somebody to say what those future rates are. At this time, it is the Budget Committee's recommendation that council not increase rates and actually not go ahead with the 5-year plan to continue those increases and to defer this item to a new rate study. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to direct them.
I do. So for the last 3 years that we have not increased according to this schedule.
In 2012, we did increase. In 2013, we increased. In 2014, we increased.
We did increase all 3 of those years?
In 2015, right before the election, we are at the 2014 numbers. In 2015, right before our election, council opted to not increase the rates. Here we are again, and we would like to go back in and say we didn't adopt in the 2015, and we don't want to go forward with adopting the 2015 numbers right now until we look at the capital plan to make sure that that rate increase is necessary. Our funds are healthy at this time.
Okay, so we have the money available to cover what?
We have the money available to cover our current expenses. If we're going to go in and do a major CIP work, we may have to increase those rates, but what we need to actually get on the ground and decide what projects are we going to go forward with. When are we going to go for an expansion of our wastewater treatment plant? We need to have a long-term and a short-term schedule of projects so that can be incorporated within the rate study. Mr. Manager.
One of the key things to add, and you've heard, sound like a broken record, but one of the key things is there is a change in leadership. We are auditing the projects and the records. We do have some regulatory things with the state that we need to handle. And when we sat down, Gabe and I and Lisa, and we took a look at the 2012 study and the projects therein, we believe that a lot has changed since 2012. Priorities have changed. Some of the challenges that we have now, we didn't have at that time, or we didn't fully understand at that time. So the thought process is, we do have some money in savings in those 2 accounts, in water and sewer, that if we had something catastrophic go on, we believe we could handle. We need to take a serious look at our regulatory challenges and the projects that we need to do and make sure that our projects are in line with where the state is telling us our projects need to be, and then figure out what, how, and if we come up with a schedule to fund those projects and complete them. Is that clear?
And so, in other words, what you want to do is evaluate what our last firm that we hired, the rates that they set, or suggested set. You want to go back in and take a look at what we've done, what we haven't done,
yes,
and their rates that they've suggested.
It's basically, Mr. Mayor, it's a 2-phase process when they look at these rates. The first thing that they look at is our last few audits that are completed by finance on an annual basis, and tell whether, from an operational standpoint, we're able to operate our water and sewer utilities in the black. That's key. But secondarily, that we have the capacity to provide the projects that we need to provide to stay in compliance and to provide a high level of service for our customers. At this time, we're challenged because we see a list of projects that aren't necessarily aligned with what we know our needs are. So it's hard to justify raising people's rates for projects that we may not want to do, need to do, and it could go one of 2 ways. We could end up with projects that are less expensive than what was projected in 2012. It could end up where we have projects that are far more expensive than what were included in 2012. But the key is there's a number of things that we need to do and that we need to come in compliance with. And my belief personally is that we probably should take a virgin look at those projects based on what our needs are and take a look at the study from that point and start again. It could be higher rates than if we stayed on the schedule. It could be lower rates than if we stayed on the schedule. That's unknown at this time.
In 4 years, this study was done 4 years ago, and things have changed, definitely. So I agree with what you're proposing.
Well, just as long as it doesn't create, my concern is if we hold it off, is it going to create a bigger increase when we do the study? That's the thing that scares me.
Well, I just feel we need to know where we're at, and then we'll make the decision. I mean, whatever it needs to be. It could be lower, it could be higher.
Because I know in the past that prior councils have taken the recommendation of the companies and decreased them rather than accept the whole budget or the whole recommendation.
If I understand this right, what we're saying is that we really don't know enough right now to do anything, and we need to go through this rate analysis.
Well, if we were going to move forward, we would either move forward in two directions. We would either move forward in adopting for the current fee schedule, and that means that we would give our notice of intent to increase fees, and that would be on the March 7th meeting. Or we take a step back, we look at the programs and the projects that need to be incorporated, make sure that we have the proper projects in the study to make sure that we are aligning our rates to our services. And at this time, that is what staff and the budget committee is recommending, is that we make sure that we align the service levels with the project levels and our rates. And that would have to be done through another study.
But the justification would be what we need to have in order to go to and increase our rates in the public side.
Yeah, we want to basically have a transparent document that shows why we need the money to do what improvements in the future. And then we want those projects to be included into our future CIPs. And we want to show the public that we're actually doing the projects that we said that we needed. The reason why we needed the money to be increased, the rates to increase, are because of those projects. And we want to show that we are completing those projects in a timely way. It's all related together.
Okay.
Sounds like a logical process. As long as we have enough operational funds to continue and put it off, I think it sounds logical.
Any other, John? Okay, I need a motion.
Make a motion to approve not going forward with the rate increase at this time.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to not move forward with the rate increase in the water, wastewater. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Brent.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm sure that you're tired of hearing from me for one night, so I'm going to try to go through this as quick as possible. First off, I wanted to announce that Mr. Mark Eckhoff has completed and is certified now to provide emotional and spiritual care in disasters. So I said that kind of in jest, but this is an important thing. As you know, we are an emergency management organization in a number of capacities, and there are a certain amount of classes that you're expected to take for continuing education for things like your floodplain manager certificate. This is a big class, a very expensive class that we got done cheaply, and actually invited members of the council if they wanted to attend with Mark. It's a tough deal. This was several days, if I recall, and pretty intensive. Mark?
It was a 2-day class, and actually I found an opportunity to attend it for free at the Salvation offices in Phoenix. So it was a wonderful class. It was really intense. It was emotional because we deal a lot with preparing for disasters and dealing with them when they occur. Not so much the aftermath of dealing with the emotional issues and the need to help get people back on their feet. So it was a good perspective on the whole emergency management structure that we have.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the second item I have is I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the home tour this weekend. And I know I sent you all an email this morning, but I thought it very important to tell the public I have participated in several events similar to this one in the past in various places that shall remain nameless. This is the finest home tour I have ever seen in my career. I was blown away. It all started for me last Thursday night when I was invited to be a keynote speaker at the Volunteer Recognition and Training Program. Wow, 140 volunteers from this community and surrounding areas to assist, 28 properties, very well done, greeted with a smile. People were happy. I heard nothing but positive comments. When I was out on the tour, I was able to take my 2 daughters and my wife, and we were able to participate. We rode the trolley. That was my kids' top priority, as we must get on the trolley and ride the trolley. We did so. I'm told, I'm going to give you numbers when we get numbers in, but unfortunately we got people out with the flu. It's kind of a sickness going around City Hall here. Some people are done with being in the Walking Dead, Mark, and others hopefully are not going to get more ill this week. But I'm told that over 1,000 tickets were sold, over 140 volunteers. The weather was beautiful. What a neat event. I talked to a couple of our local businesses as I walked around town. They were very happy with the amount of folks that were coming in their businesses. So congratulations to you, to the town, to the staff, to our partners in the chamber and others for such a successful event. I'll also add that I had an opportunity to talk to the chief today, and the Hells Angels event also went off without a hitch this weekend. 487 bikes, I think, enrolled this year, and from everything I've been told, it was very successful, and businesses did well downtown. The last thing, I'm going to close it out with something that's not as positive. House Bill 2385, which is known as the Incorporation for Urbanized Areas Bill, has been assigned to a committee. That is the Judiciary Committee, and they're going to have a hearing tomorrow morning at 9:30. It's going to be held in the HHR 3 room. I believe that's the House Hearing Room 3. The town staff, unless we're told otherwise, will be signing on to the system as opposed to the legislation. And we'll be asking for Representative Farnsworth to hold a meeting with the various stakeholders, including the town of Florence, before moving forward with his bill. Both Apache Junction and Maricopa have verified that they're going to support Florence in opposing this bill. We will keep you up to speed, up to date on how that bill progresses.
I guess everybody's aware what that is. And we all know that this has been an ongoing situation for how many years now, Jess?
Since 2009?
For the last 7 years. In taking a look at it, the town has always taken a position of, hey, let's educate the people out there. It's okay for them to make the decision, but let's make sure that they have the right knowledge of what's actually going on. In my opinion, the incorporation bill that we have on the books today is a good bill. It's a good legislation. This would be changing that to a certain degree, and my need, I don't see the need for that. You know, last year, Representative Coleman met with the folks from out in Santan Valley. I think there were 6 different groups there that had 6 different areas they wanted to incorporate. Representative Coleman asked them to meet with us and to meet other entities that had a dog in the fight, so to speak. None of these was ever done. None of this was ever done. The people that were behind it have just gone and go to another legislature to get this bill in there. As far as the incorporation of Santan Valley, on the 80,000 or 90,000 or whatever number they use, that would hurt us and hurt every incorporated town within the county. Am I against the people wanting to vote so that they can become a municipality? No. I'm for them being educated and advised and shown what actually a town does and how much it costs to operate and where the money comes to operate it. It's just not somebody going out and say, well, we want to become a town because we live here. And I think that I'd like to, have staff write off a letter or an email to Representative Farnsworth and ask him to be able to meet with us and also with all involved in this. And I think that, like I said, I think the legislation we have today on incorporation and annexations is good. I don't see the need for this bill to go forward, but he's been asked to bring it forward by a certain group out in Santan. But I don't know if the council has any other ideas on that. I know that on the press releases and the information that Justice sent out here to us recently on that bill. If you go back and look at the press releases that have been done, it's always said we're not against it if they're told the truth, and let them make a decision. Does the council have any other suggestion that they'd like to see as far as the information that the manager will be sending up on email?
Possibly Jess can touch base with Mark. We can get something out into the paper to educate the community and also provide the contact information, so if they choose to write letters as well, they have that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
I just would like to say, this is a very complicated issue. The mayor and I and the staff have met with a couple of our representatives on it. And when you start looking at all the details about what it takes to operate a town, I don't think our friends up north quite realize what they have to do. They don't know what it's going to cost them for the infrastructure. What's it going to cost them to build a town, to build a town hall, a police station, a fire station, and all that. We have done that over 150 years. And so we have a long time investment, and we sort of got things done when it was cheap. But now if they have to go build all that, it's going to cost them quite a bit of money, and I don't think they understand that. We have to educate them that somehow.
And I think by opposing this and trying to get with Representative Farnsworth or whoever on whatever committee they appointed to the Judiciary Committee, who's the chair of that? We don't know?
I don't know.
But I think we still, my opinion is we should still stand in opposition to this legislation and go for getting the meetings with the representatives and the stakeholders out there.
Mr. Mayor?
Let me say something else. And not only Florence, but I think Pinal County needs to be brought into it because they are citizens of the county right now that are providing services to them. And they also need to, and Pinal County plays an integral part in this legislation as far as authorizing the vote to go ahead. So I think that the town and other entities that want to become involved with us, whether it be Apache Junction, Maricopa, along with Pinal County, need to be doing this.
Yeah, I think he said that AJ and Maricopa are already on board with us, so I think he's on top of it in opposition. So,
Brent?
Mr. Mayor, it's probably an appropriate point to say that the CAG Legislative Day is coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I am guessing that our two local representatives, our local senator, perhaps Mr. Farnsworth, they will probably all be in attendance, as well as every other city, town, and county in the CAG region, which is Pinal and Gila County. So a large contingent from Florence participating in those discussions would probably be helpful as well.
And this legislation, it could affect the West Valley of Maricopa County eventually one of these days also. And I can guarantee if it was affecting somebody up in Maricopa County, there'd be a lot more opposition to what we got behind us or where we're at right now. Anybody else on it? So go ahead and get that off. You've heard the direction of the council. Second call of the public. Anybody have anything else, Ruth?
Ruth Harrison, Florence, Arizona, again. I'd just like to say a couple of other things about the floodplain that was discussed tonight and the potential disasters that were discussed tonight. Building in a floodplain, I have to say, can be problematic. And if you do some research, I think you'll see that places that have done that have altered their floodplain, have had problems and issues that they probably didn't want to have. Remember that a floodplain is a natural structure and it serves a purpose. And changing and distorting it can lead to issues that we might not want to have to deal with. So thank you for your attention and for your interest.
Thank you, Ron. Anyone else from the public? Close call to the public, call to the council. John?
Yes, I'd like to just talk about the event on Saturday. I appreciate what the manager said, and it was a great event. I had a personal involvement with the arts and culture, and we did something new and different. I don't know how many people went to see the quick draw, but it turned out to be sort of a popular event, at least from what we saw, and I want to thank Jennifer for her participation and leadership in that. Those are the kind of things that we need to do, try things different, try things that are exciting, and it very good. Thank you, Jen.
Valerie?
I don't have anything else. It's all been said.
Karen?
I just want to mention the dedication of the sandstone solar facility down on Hunt Highway in Felix. I was very impressed with the recognition that the town of Florence received for its part in developing that facility, and how important it will be going forward to have them as part of our town, and that SRP and the developers of Sandstone, the owners and operators, are looking forward to working in cooperation with the town. It was very impressive. If you haven't seen it, there are 182,000 solar panels out there. And a lot of people driving on Felix as they come over the hill think that it looks like a lake about midday when those solar panels are turned up to the sun. But they're already generating electricity that is being purchased by SRP. And I think it's a great addition to the town. We're rapidly becoming the solar capital of the county.
Bill?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank all the volunteers for helping this weekend, and the town staff. They did a great job. And I'd also like to thank Mark's Eckhoff's department. There was a little issue with one of the citizens on a home improvement problem, and they took care of it right away, and I want to recognize them for doing such a thorough and very fast job on it.
Tara?
Ditto everything that was said earlier this evening, as well as just want to say my thoughts and prayers right now are with the Pankey family on the service that he provided for our community. And with that, I have nothing more. And I also had, I didn't know if you wanted to add that on. Mayor will go on about the services, but also we have a celebration of life memorial for former Mayor Vicky on Saturday, February 27th from 2 to 4 at Florence Town Hall.
Okay. Part of my report, I want Chief to put it out, the agenda for Sergeant Pankey's services. Dan, would you tell us what's going on?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, Friday morning at 9 o'clock, they'll have a viewing at the Catholic Church, and then at 10 o'clock, they'll have a mass. The surrounding communities have been very helpful. Police have volunteered to take any calls so that all of his fellow coworkers can be there. Sam was also a firefighter that a lot of people don't realize. Fires also stepped up to be part of this celebration of life. So we're looking forward to having an event that will let people know how much Sam was really loved.
As I said earlier, it's what a person leaves in their community that they're measured on. I believe Sam would be measured quite highly. When I came into town Saturday, I wanted to come down and go to the home tour. My wife wouldn't let me. But I did get her to drive me down Main Street. God, that was nice. People all over the place, cars having to stop for people crossing the street, people in and out of stores. I was able to get out. She let me out for about 5 minutes, and I was talking to our staff in the back that were selling the tickets. People were coming up at 2 o'clock and buying tickets. And knowing it closed at 4, they still wanted to go because I heard people that just drove through town, didn't know what was going on and stopped. Our Parks and Recreation did a good job coordinating with the volunteers and with the Historical Society and all the private homes and businesses that were open. We also were selling our 150-year T-shirts and coffee mugs down there as a fundraiser for our projects as we go through the year. I understand there's a few of those sold. You know, Jennifer, you're not wearing one of the shirts, so I know you didn't buy one. So but they are on sale now. Some of the stores will be carrying them for us. Again, we will be having a meeting, I believe it's next week on the 150th birthday we'll be having it at the library. And so anybody wants to come to it and hear what we got planned and see if you have any input in it, can change what we're looking at. And for all those that knew that I was in the hospital, thank you for your wishes and your prayers. I appreciate it very much. Contrary to some wishes, I'm still here. But I really appreciate everybody's thoughts, and so we'll see what happens. Need a motion?
Make a motion, we adjourn to executive session.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adjourn to executive session. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.